Yo, happy Friday. Oh, it's almost over. Welcome back to the Stokastic.com NBA strategy show presented by PrizePicks. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D, joined by Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS. Coming off a day where, we've seen some weird stuff, man, but how about that Brooklyn rotation?
Yeah, I mean, it was not that unexpected because Jack Vaughn said before the game Bridges probably wasn't going to play full minutes. I obviously didn't like cut him to 12 or whatever he played, but that was enough for me to not play him, not play Finney Smith. I didn't take it so far as to cut Harris and Curry though, so that hurt. Did play a lot of Sharp, did play a lot of Thomas, but yeah, not just a stupid rotation.
Yeah, the Bridges thing wasn't weird. You're right, like Dinwiddie, but just the fact that when you looked at it, the entire bench played like 30 plus minutes each.
Yeah, just peak March.
I guess. I mean, it's March 10th. I don't know. Doesn't matter. They're back on the schedule today, though. So
yeah, those guys should all be back. So
my assumption is it's just back to the status quo.
Yeah.
That's what you would think. Sabonis with a monster triple double in that win. I threw some bets out there. I put up over on Twitter. I was like, let me do some people a favor here who aren't on Odd Shopper Premium. For the 8 p.m. and later games, I said, here are our top bets right now for DraftKings and then for FanDuel. And a couple people hit some real nice parlays coming off of that. So betting night, pretty good. DFS, what a weird slate. How'd you do last night?
Not, I mean, I broke even, which was actually pretty surprising because I was over the field on Middleton. I was over the field on Holiday. I was over the field on Bane. So yeah, like that was all. I'm surprised that I broke even, but I also had a ton of Tyus Jones. I was over the field on Brook Lopez. I was over the field on Portis. I was over on Sharp. Yeah, so broke even. Had one lineup in particular that was really annoying. Like I had a good amount of Jabari Smith, so that helped. But like had Jabari Smith, had Portis, had Tyus Jones, and then just got burned by Desmond Bane being awful and Steph Curry scoring like 8 fantasy points in the second half.
Yeah, that part was tough because the first half he had a nice.
Yeah, he had like 35. The split between Curry and Halliburton was extremely annoying. I didn't have a ton of Curry. I think I was around the field, but I was definitely under on 30% Halliburton, and he had busted. And then the game goes to overtime. He scores like 15 fantasy points in overtime, ends up being the highest scoring player on the slate. So like I had that lineup going and I'm like, oh, sweet. Curry's got 36 at the half. Halliburton's going to finish with like 46. Like Curry's easily going to beat him at much lower ownership. And then Curry doesn't even get to the 46 and Halliburton ends up getting an extra period.
Yeah. Yesterday we talked about this, but we talked about Halliburton and how like as a playmaker, it's insane how the usage has been up, but we don't know if that's sustainable. And, I think that still rings true. Obviously they did have overtime. He played 38 minutes. He did 20 field goal attempts and 10 free throws again. So
yeah, he did. Yeah, I don't think he made a 3 until like the overtime period.
Yeah, he was 2 for 9 on the day.
Yeah.
But from a DFS standpoint, forget about like eye test and all that stuff right now. Is this guy the best playmaker in the league right now? Like a 19 assist game yesterday.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know that there's anybody particularly
right
close.
Because it's not Westbrook anymore, obviously. It's not.
Well, and I mean, also like if you're talking actual playmaking, like Harden and Jokic are clearly.
No, that's why I said DFS purposes. Like forget about like. I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, Jokic is a good one, but when you're just looking at the raw numbers every day, like you're not seeing a ton of these 15, 17, 19 assist type games like Halliburton seems to put up relatively frequently now.
Right. Yeah. If you're saying from a DFS standpoint, like who's going to get the most assists, it's pretty much always Halliburton.
It's crazy. Yeah. I Josh said Jokic. I think still though. I mean, let's see what their assist rates are this year. Just curious.
But it's also for Jokic and Harden. The thing is that the guys that they pass to are shooting so good. Like that's on them as well as far as playmaking.
That's a good point. Yeah, like it's not that hard to dish him out to Joel Embiid. Listen, Harden's a phenomenal playmaker.
No, I'm saying it as a good thing for them. Like they're passing these guys open. They're getting it to them in the right spots. Like that's
right. Also. But also largely better teammates too.
Jokic's teammates kind of suck.
Murray is one of the better shooting guard.
Denver obviously is a good team around. Like they're good, but like That team is shooting like 55% when Jokic doesn't pass them the ball, and like 60 something when he does pass them the ball.
I mean, that's fair. 48% assist rate for Halliburton this year. Not bad. Pretty good. But anyway, that's besides the point. They're not on the schedule today. Nikola Jokic is on the schedule going up against the Spurs, so we'll get into that. He's got 46.6% assist rate as well. Let's talk about let's dive into this. Before we do, though, happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. It takes us a long way. I promise you that much. Atone for your sins. Otherwise, I wouldn't ask. Leave a comment down below as well. Yeah, if you're watching after the fact, we try and at the very least read all of them, respond to as many as we can. And if you're listening in podcast form, we see you out there. Leave a rating, a review, particularly if you like it. That always helps us more, and we appreciate it. Also, subscribe to the pod. Tell your friends about the show here. Strategy show, deeper dive, all that good stuff. Let's get into it. Atlanta on the road against, one more thing I wanted to mention to you. Kind of important. Not a lot of injury news right now for a 6-game slate at all.
Yeah, you have Simon's questionable in a 7:00 game. Other than that, nobody showing up is questionable that matters. We know we get D'Angelo Russell back today.
Yeah, but like even with Simons, I mean, all that really does if he plays is make Portland look worse as a team.
Right. And like if he's out, you're used to him being out. It's not like
doesn't change anything.
Right. It's not opening up value.
Yeah, exactly. Like Atlanta and Washington, not a single relevant player on the injury list. We can talk about Atlanta though, because this is actually the same matchup we discussed. What was it, 2 days ago, when we talked about you had actually pulled up Trae Young as a pick and roll ball handler, and Washington was it worse than points per possession allowed to roll ball handlers?
Yeah, worse than the league.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back and dig into that a little more, but he didn't even shoot much in that game. He just shot 11 for 14 from the field. I mean, really strong, efficient performance from Trae Young. His price has come up a little bit. Do we go back to him today?
Yeah, I think so. Same good matchup that we talked about the other day. He is coming in at 9,300, so the price tag came back up, but it's back to where it normally is. It's not like he's overpriced now. Still looks pretty good, pulling 13% ownership, 13% chance of being optimal, playing 33 to 35 minutes typically. I don't have any issue getting them.
Looking at the rest of Atlanta, though, too, you have John Collins. He's down at 4,200. DeJounte Murray's actually getting the most ownership on this team, $7,700. Excuse me. I guess you can make sense of that. Playing massive minutes, 36, 37, 39 over his last three. Mid 7K price point in a good matchup. A game that currently has a total sitting at 238 with a 1.5 point spread. I can get behind $7,700 Murray on this slate.
Yeah, it's a relatively cheap price tag, especially given that at least the way things look right now, it's going to be hard to play it as like a stars and scrubs slate. These mid-range plays are going to look a little bit better. And since Quinn Snyder took over, we've seen Trae Young's playing time drop off a little bit where you're seeing these 33, 34-minute games, but that hasn't been the case for DeJounte Murray. Like you said, coming off a game last time against Washington where he played nearly 39 minutes, he's typically played an extra minute or two per game this year compared to Young, even going back to Nate McMillan. And we're seeing that trend continue where Murray's playing time hasn't really been affected by Quinn Snyder. Nothing's really changed there. That's a pretty cheap price tag. He does take a back seat to Young in terms of fantasy production when they both play, but he's still a good fantasy producer, around 1.1 fantasy points per minute and playing huge minutes at a pretty cheap price tag.
What do you make of Collins at 4,200? And what do you make of the recent playing time?
So I liked him a little bit the other day when he was low owned at 4,100. He was like 2% owned. I think I had like 8 to 10%. The problem now, though, is that he's up to 17% because we just saw him have a solid game. He played 29 minutes. When he doesn't play well, though, those minutes are going to Sadiq Bey. We've seen that. This is, I think, the first time under Snyder that we've actually seen like full run from John Collins. So I'm kind of in the opposite boat here where I'm not just giving John Collins 28 to 30 minutes because he played well last game. I think expecting around 24-ish on average makes sense. And he has overall, been bad for pretty much the entire season. So there is risk in going there. I get that there's a nice ceiling because he is only 4,200. We don't have a ton of value on the slate. So there is some appeal. But that ownership does scare me a little bit just because it's still a guy that if he's not playing well, which typically this year he has not, he's going to lose his minutes to Sadiq Bey. And we've seen that consistently.
No. Yeah, you look at some of the playing time. I think Snyder's first game, they hired him on the 26th, so I don't know when his first game actually was. But you've seen a 20 in there, a 16, a 23, a 26. It's tough, especially like you said, at that ownership. With that in mind, though, is there anybody else that stands out or is at least like Bogdan Bogdanovic is basically the same price as John Collins today. He's pulling 11%. You want to get to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, he's another one. And just to, I guess, clarify on Collins, it's not that I think he's a bad play. If you have a lineup where you already have a couple contrarian plays and you need a value guy, like John Collins fits in fine. Yeah. There's no issue there. It's just like I think it's important to point out that you can't just look at last game and be like, oh, John Collins is back. He shot well, he played well, he got his fourth quarter minutes. It's nice to know that if he plays well, that'll happen. But those minutes still aren't secure. Same goes for Bogdanovic. He did still only play 24 minutes last game. He had a very good game. I actually sort of view his last game as a negative because he played really well and he still didn't crack the closing lineup. So that kind of concerns me. Like, is he just sort of stuck at 24 minutes here? And at 4,500, there is still some value there. I view him pretty similarly to Collins, where he's somebody that I've liked getting to a little bit on slates where he's not getting ownership because he is a good player. He, in theory, can get 28 to 30 minutes, although I'm not sure Quinn Snyder agrees at this point. But here you're getting, 11 to 12% ownership, 4,500 shooting guard, small forward. He projects as a decent value given what you have on this slate. I just think it's important with him as well to keep in mind that the playing time hasn't really been there under Quinn Snyder.
Okay. Anything else for Atlanta?
Not really. DeAndre Hunter, Sadiq Bey, not pulling as much ownership. Don't really like either one, but I don't think that they're that different than Bogdanovic and Collins other than being slightly more expensive.
Talk about your Wizards then on the other side. Interesting team right now because they're all like the three of these guys are really coexisting and putting up big numbers. It isn't to say that all three of them will every given night, but you just look at recent performances and you've seen like Bradley Beal, the peripherals, the big peripherals recently are bolstering some of these performances. But I mean, just look at, I'm going to go back and see, like go back the last however many games and see what the usage is for these three guys, because all of them, just from an opportunity perspective, including Kyle Kuzma, who's the cheapest of the trio, they're all getting there. Maybe not all in the same day, but they've all been getting there lately, man.
Yeah, and they're all reasonably priced here. One big thing with Beal recently is that he has been playing more, played another nearly 37 minutes last game. An article actually just came out in The Athletic talking about how Washington's relying on him too much down the stretch, but too much down the stretch of games, late in the fourth quarter. But that's not entirely, that doesn't really matter for DFS, just kind of an interesting piece. But overall this year, when all three of these guys have been active, you've still gotten 1.1 DraftKings points per minute for Beal. You've gotten 1.1 for Kuzma. You've gotten 1.3 for Porzingis. So the production is there. It's a good matchup. More than one of these guys certainly can have a big game. You saw it last game out where Beal was fine. I think had like 45 DraftKings points, but Kuzma went for mid 50s. I think Porzingis went for like 60. He set a career high with 43 actual points. Yeah. So I'm certainly interested in getting to these guys. Kuzma pulling half the ownership of Beal and less than half the ownership of Porzingis stands out as probably going the most under-owned of the three. It still gives you a high ceiling. He's playing big minutes. Small forward, power forward is nice, but certainly happy to get to Porzingis, happy to get to Beal as well.
Okay. Yeah, looking at these guys since the start of March, just usage. And I know that Kuzma missed that one game, but Beal 33%, Kuzma 28%, Porzingis 27%. And then it's really just scattered amongst a bunch of other guys at like 14 and 15%. So
yeah, like those guys are clearly just going to dominate everything offensively.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, once you get past them, like I know Avdia, we can talk about Denny Avdia. He's getting some ownership today. He's also cheap. I was a little, I'll be honest, maybe you can help me with this. I was a little bit surprised by right now projecting a quarter of the field to get to Denny Avdia today.
Yeah, we have a weird thing with Denny Avdia in the morning, it seems like. We had the same thing the other day. He was like 20 something, projected to be 20 something percent owned in the morning, still on the deep dive. Like me and Josh were like, what the hell are we doing? Like how are people getting to him? And then by the time we got to lock, we had him down to like 3 or 4%. He was like 4% owned. I think you see a similar thing today. Like right now, we have him projected for 26 and a half minutes. That can't be the projection for Denny Avdia right now. So,
No way.
like, I think that you're just going to see that come down. He played 23 minutes last game. He had played, I think, 20 the game before that. You have Monte Morris back. You have Kispert once again in the closing lineup last game. That's a couple games in a row. He's closed ahead of Avdia. Can Avdia play 26 minutes? Sure, if he finds his way into the closing lineup. But the closing lineup's going to have one of Gafford, Morris, or it's going to have two of Gafford, Morris, Wright, Avdia, Kispert, basically. Like, it's no guarantee that it ends up being obvious. So that projection is just too high, and I think it is leading to the ownership projection being too high. Now, if you want to gamble on Avdia in tournaments and hope that he plays well and gets into the closing lineup, that's one thing. But there's no way that his projection ends up being this high and his ownership ends up being this high.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly how it feels. Let's keep it moving then. Portland and Philadelphia. For those of you guys just jumping in here on Friday morning, what's up? We're having some fun here on the strategy show. Hit that thumbs up too if you enjoy this type of stuff. So Portland, Anthony Simons is questionable. You and I mentioned it right at the top of the show. And it's weird because if Anthony Simons plays, it doesn't help anybody at all, as a matter of fact. I know Lillard's price has come down, but a lot of these other guys are still priced up with this team, dealing with some absences because your Yusuf Nurkic is back too. But then even if Anthony Simons doesn't play, it's not like you're looking at a team, and that isn't to say that you couldn't get to Lillard at 10-9, by the way. His price has come down like $700 in one game. But it's not like any of these guys, they're already priced for Anthony Simons to be out, put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And it is the Lillard price is actually interesting. I don't think it's gonna be that easy to get to him, at least with what we have right now. But 10-9, if Simons is in, that's still a decent price. You still get, a very high ceiling for him. But if he's out and you're just back to this 40% usage, 40% assist, or a little bit lower now with Nurkic back, but still like very, very productive Damian Lillard, that's a really cheap price tag if Simons is out.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Like the Lillard price is what's most intriguing to me because, you take someone like Jeremy Grant, his price is essentially where it was last game, hasn't moved. Most of same with Matisse Thybulle. Cam Reddish's price point actually came up $800. And this is on DraftKings. Damian Lillard went from 11.9 down to 11.7, 11.6, 11.5. So still the same. He's down to 10-9. He's sub 11K today. So yeah.
Yeah. And also they're being really cautious with Nurkic. He played 17 and a half minutes last game. They had said coming in that they were probably going to be overly cautious with him for a while. So, when he's on the floor, sure, he's a higher usage guy than Drew Eubanks and Trendon Watford. That's going to lower Lillard's usage a little bit, but it's not like you're getting 30-something minutes from Nurkic and he's playing the bulk of the minutes that Lillard plays. It's still going to be a lot, if Simons is out, of Lillard out there with a bunch of dudes that don't play offense.
Is this center rotation now unplayable for you, even with Nurkic limited? Because
pretty much, yeah. I mean, Nurkic is 6,100. Like, I don't know how you get there. I don't know how he's projected for 30 DraftKings points either. I assume that comes down, but yeah, I mean, we have him at 24 minutes. That's on the high end of what I would expect. But either way, you're not getting there at 6,100. Eubanks at 3,800 didn't even play in the second half. They went straight to Trendon Watford. So I can't.
He had a nice game too.
Yeah, I can't feel very confident in his minutes. Watford did get some minutes at the 4, which also has impact on other parts of this team, like Matisse Thybulle, but he's center only. Like, it's still just tough to get there. If you wanted to make a case for any of these guys, I think I would make the case for Watford, just because, like, what if they kick Eubanks out of the rotation? What if they run that second half rotation where Eubanks isn't in and Watford's the straight backup? Then he starts to look good. I don't think that's what happens, but he's the easiest one. If you had to make a case for one of these guys, he's the easiest one to get to. But realistically, I don't think I get to any of them.
Anybody else for Portland then, or you want to talk Philly here?
So I did want to mention Matisse Thybulle didn't play nearly as many minutes. Now, this game was a blowout, but he wasn't getting as many minutes anyway. He played about 16 in the first half. played an very abbreviated stint in the second quarter. But I am a little concerned. I mentioned that, that Watford played some minutes alongside Yusuf Nurkic. And if you're going to get some minutes at the 4 from him, assuming Nas Little still plays a sizable role, I think that Thibault still gets playing time, plenty of playing time, but I don't think you're going to get, those 36, 37-minute games nearly as frequently, and you really need those for Thibault. So it makes him less appealing than he typically is anyway.
Philly today's another weird one. Like, they're back to full strength. Embiid is expensive, Harden pricey. It's a good spot, don't get me wrong, but Maxi's up to $7,500. It isn't to say like you don't play Embiid and Harden in a spot like this, but I'm not sure you can look at this team and think that anyone's really a priority either.
Yeah, same boat. Harden and Embiid both pulling about 8% ownership. Harris at 6%. Maxi getting 3%. Maxi getting none because he's up to 7,500.
7,500, yeah.
Right. Yeah. He's priced for Harden not to play, basically. So Embiid and Harden, like if you get there, great. It's kind of like Dame. I don't think they're going to be, at least with the way things look right now, I don't think they're going to be that easy to get to at the moment. But if you can get there, sure. Solid matchup. Harden 10-3, probably going to be easier to get to than Embiid at 11-6. But they both look good. It's just a matter of getting to those prices. Tobias Harris' salary came up a little bit as well. He certainly is hurt by the return of James Harden, but he is small forward, power forward, weaker positions, still a decent price tag. So I get why he's getting a little bit of ownership.
Okay. Well, then let's talk a little bit on Cleveland, Miami. So we just recently saw this matchup, and unsurprisingly, that low total, it still cruised under by 10 points. It was 214.5, finished with a 204 total points. Again, really not a huge surprise given just how these two teams play. But we can dig into it, see if there's anything worthwhile here. Cleveland fully healthy right now. Karis LeVert, right? We have Karis LeVert getting the most ownership on this slate, on this team at 11% at 4,200. We're even giving 6% to Rubio at 3,300. And look, I do understand one thing. There's not a ton of great value right now on the large majority of teams out there, and most of them have no injuries to speak of whatsoever.
Right. And I mean, this is a pretty unappealing game. I think it's an interesting game for tournaments. Like one thing that stands out is, we talked about Trae Young. We really like that spot against Washington and all of that. He's pulling 15% ownership or so. Donovan Mitchell's $300 cheaper, pulling 1/3 the ownership. Trae Young certainly projects better, but Donovan Mitchell is going to beat him a relatively high percentage of the time. Same goes for Darius Garland at 8,100 coming off of a 39-minute game. These guys both have very, very high ceilings. It's just that their median projections aren't that appealing in this matchup, but they still have the ability to go out there and be very, very solid contrarian plays in tournaments. Same can be said for a $6,200 Jared Allen. That's a cheap price tag on him. 7,900 on Mobley. You mentioned LeVert actually getting ownership at 4,200. Played 24 minutes last game. The game before that, he played, I think, 33. He cracked the closing lineup in that game. Didn't close last game. They went with a Coro instead. But you certainly have a path to him getting into the closing lineup and getting more minutes. So LeVert just sort of fits into your lineups because of that price tag. But in tournaments, I do like the idea of getting to some Mitchell, Allen, Garland, just because they do give you very high ceilings despite the tough matchup. And they're getting a fraction of the ownership compared to some other players around them.
I guess just looking at this game as a whole, you're not going to find much. Kevin Love is on the other side at 10%. I think that's a great point you make on Mitchell, by the way. Kevin Love's probable to play this one. I mean, what can we reasonably project him for? 20, 22 minutes or something like that? 22 minutes probably?
Yeah, I think so. Like, you're just not getting that much out of him recently.
No, he's been a sub 1 fantasy point per minute player since he came to Miami. He hasn't been horrible, but you're just, I don't know. I'm just trying to pull anything out of this one. I suppose you could take some shots on a 5% Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo remarkably did you see how many rebounds he had last game in this same matchup?
No, I didn't.
1.
That's impressive.
Yeah, 1 rebound for Bam in almost 30 minutes. It was the strangest game, man. Just completely could do nothing on the glass. But with Miami, once again, Real tough matchup for them. Slow paced game. What's the total in this? Same as it was, 214.5. It's hard to love this spot.
Yeah, it's similar to the Cleveland side, where if you get to some low-owned Bam, some low-owned Jimmy Butler, low-owned $7,400 hero, that's all fine. But it is a very tough matchup against Cleveland. You're not expecting a ton of scoring in this game. So I pretty much just view those guys as decent contrarian plays based on their talent, but they don't stand out. The value here is playable, but shaky. Kevin Love, we were just talking about, I assume plays around 22 minutes. That gets him a projection between like 20 and 22 DraftKings points at 4,400. Looks okay, but nothing special there. Oladipo did close the last game, like 31.5 minutes. You didn't see much playing time for Gabe Vincent. So Oladipo's pulling, 8% ownership. He's not very good though. And clearly when you have Hero, Bam, and Butler in, Oladipo's going to take a step back offensively. So it's not like you're comfortable with him, but the playing time should be there.
Yeah. Well, let's get into one that's pulling a ton of ownership right now, Brooklyn and Minnesota. Before we do though, shout out to our sponsor, PrizePicks. I mean, we're talking about a free month of everything over at Stokastic.com, right? Stokastic plus Platinum. If you were to go over to Stokastic.com/join right now and you said, I'd like to get a month of everything, right? They talk about the boom bust tool. I've seen all the success everyone's had using that, the ownership projections, the player projections, the projected stats. That lineup generator looks pretty sweet. Lineup builder on top of that, all of it. Oh, and what about like, hey, I want to get into some MMA or some PGA as well, some NASCAR, all that good stuff. Trying to throw my hat in the ring for other sports, maybe baseball coming up, a little NHL action, XFL, college football, basketball, because I know they got it all. Well, now you're getting that for free. Would have been $120. You're getting it entirely free when you sign up over at PrizePicks using the link. Got to use the link. Otherwise, we can't take your word for it. That's how we track it. Link in the description and link in chat. Listen, if you're wondering, why would they give a free month out for this? Very simple. We think you will win. We think you will love the tools. And the hope is that you'll stick around. You can, you got the access to the premium Discord, everything for a full calendar month. We want you guys to win. We want you to see what you can do with, a full arsenal of tools over there that you didn't have. Whether you're playing in the quarter arcade or you're maxing out the main contest every day is irrelevant. The tools work the same, particularly in all of these large field tournaments, any tournaments for that matter. Plus, PrizePicks is pretty sweet, and you're getting $100 first match deposit bonus there. So if you throw $100 in, your account balance is going to say $200. Even if you only have $10, put 10 in, it's going to say 20. Throw 50 in, you're getting the 100. So check it out. PrizePicks, Josh's video, he's in chat right now, timing people out or just hiding them all together. His PrizePicks video is over on OddsShopper YouTube channel. That's our betting channel. 5 or 6, maybe 7 days a week. It's out there a lot. All the tools you need to win at PrizePicks are over at Stokastic. You're going to get them for free anyway. And it's a sick format where you're just taking player props, taking the over or the under, no juice on either side, no juice on either side of them, just over, under, putting them into a lineup and building out what traditional books would consider parlays. The difference here, if you hit 5 of 5, you 10x. If you hit 6 of 6, you 25x. But unlike a traditional book, over at PrizePicks, if you go 4 of 5, and something real shitty happens, right? Like you had a Brooklyn starter and you had the over yesterday, and that's your leg that busts this out and you go 4 of 5, you're still 2xing. Even if you go 3 of 5, you're still making money back on that entry. It's a huge way to sustain your bankroll and also put yourself in a position for some massive wins. Last thing I'll say, non-legal betting states, you're looking to scratch that itch, get in on the action. PrizePicks is available in almost every single non-legal betting state. So check it out. Free month of Stokastic plus Platinum, $120 value, every sport, not just basketball, and the first match deposit bonus up to $100. All the tools you need to win there and everywhere else for a DFS perspective. So links in the description and in chat. We'll see you guys up. Make sure to say hi in the Discord if you decide to take advantage of this and sign up too. All right, Brooklyn and Minnesota. Brooklyn Nets on the road, second of a back-to-back, should be well rested. 4.5-point dogs, 232 total. How do you want to kick it off with guys like Dinwiddie, Cameron Johnson, Royce O'Neal, and the like?
Yeah, so I mean, assuming these guys are in, because I'm pretty sure yesterday was a rest day. Cam Johnson does have did, I think, actually have a knee issue, but I still think it was just a rest day. I expect him to be back. And if these guys are back and we don't get any weird news, I assume that they're just going to play normal minutes, and it's actually going to make them look pretty appealing on a slate where we haven't had a lot of plays that we like. You have Mikal Bridges at 8,200. He's been a monster since joining this team. Certainly gives you a high ceiling at that price. There are plenty of guys to like in that price range, but 7% ownership coming into him certainly makes him look like a good tournament play. Dinwiddie only 7,300. That looks good. 6K on Cameron Johnson looks pretty good. Nick Claxton at 6,700, pulling 15% ownership. No issues with that. We have 15% ownership coming to Daron Sharp. I'm not entirely sure what to do with that. If Nerlens Noel is in, he's the backup center. At least that's what we saw previously. If they rest Noel on the second half of a back-to-back after mostly resting him on the first half, then I could see a case for using a 3K there on Sharp, assuming you're going to get like 17, 18 minutes. But if Noel's in, Noel, I think, is the backup, which means don't play Sharp. But definitely something to keep an eye on there. Royce O'Neal at 3,800, pulling 20% ownership. Like, that feels awful because it's Royce O'Neal, but we don't have a ton of value on this slate. It is a pretty good matchup. You are likely getting, mid to upper 20s from him off the bench. So I can see getting to some of him, although I probably don't want that much of him.
Okay. Josh Engelman in chat. 4-1 on PrizePicks yesterday. Not bad. Means you're at least 2x in there. 17-6 since Sunday. All right. Telling you, use the link. Tail the action. Use the videos and the tools. 17-6 since Sunday ain't too bad. Look, even if you don't hit all 5, you're still making twice your entry, and you're not finding that most other places. They say thank you. We'll see you later and collect your money. All right. Anything else for Brooklyn if we're looking a little bit further down here? Like, top priorities for you, I guess, would be the best way to ask it.
Dinwiddie, Claxton. They're the guys that I feel the best about getting to. Bridges, but he is a little bit more expensive. In terms of guys that are probably going to show up in lineups a lot, O'Neal, because he's cheap. Certainly don't feel good about it, though.
On the Minnesota side, yeah, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 39% right now.
What?
That will absolutely change. I mean, there's just no possible. I know Jalen Noel is out, but that doesn't matter to the extent that he's pulling that much ownership at all. Can't be. No chance.
Yeah, I mean, the guy played 20 minutes. Yeah, he played 20 minutes last game. We have him projected for 23, which whatever, like probably a little high, but yeah, that's insane ownership. There's no way.
No. He has it. The most he's played since he started getting minutes was 24. Like at 24, 24 minutes at 3,500 against Minnesota wouldn't make him a bad play given, the lack of value on the slate, but 40% is wild.
Right. Yeah. No, I think he's fine in the sense of like, there's not a lot of value on this slate. Let's hope we get a good 22 minutes out of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He's not fine in terms of A, having a 31% chance of being optimal, and B, being 39% owned. Like, those just can't be right. But he is fine as a value play, assuming that ownership comes down if you want to take shots on him in tournaments. Like, the playing time you've gotten from him recently, 24, 21, 17, 20, 24, 20. The playing time's there. He's not a great fantasy producer, but, he is capable of scoring at times. They're not asking him to take on some like massive role here. But with the second unit, he's out there typically with Kyle Anderson. So you have Anderson and, Alexander Walker handling the ball. So like he's cheap. He does have a path to success. That ownership is just insane though.
It really is. The rest of this team pretty popular too, though. Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, 9,500 pulling 13%. That's somewhat interesting to me, just that he's not that popular on a 6-game slate. He's expensive, but he's not egregiously expensive. And I think the thing with Anderson, and you would agree, or with Anthony Edwards, is he has that massive ceiling, but he's also the type of guy that, isn't racking up massive peripherals. There are going to be times where he just shoots miserably from the field. And because I can't stress this enough, because he's not a guy that gets to the charity stripe all that often, when he has those off shooting nights and is like 1 for 8 from 3 and 4 for 20 from the field, very hard to salvage that performance at that salary.
Yeah, and we've also seen a little bit of a drop-off in assist percentage since Mike Conley joined the team. That has been offset by an uptick in usage. So I don't think it's a really big deal. The point per minute production in the games he's played with Conley compared to Russell is a little bit lower, but that ceiling is certainly still there for him. It's just that the price tag's gotten expensive as well. So, you're getting him in that price range with Trae Young, with Donovan Mitchell. It is a decent matchup here. He does have shooting guard, small forward eligibility. So I think that 12% ownership makes sense. We have him with about a 12% chance of being optimal as well. That all seems fine to me.
What about the rest of these guys that we haven't touched on? Pretty popular.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert looks pretty interesting. His price tag's come down a little bit to 7K. The issue with him recently is he's just not playing as many minutes as he was earlier in the year. Naz Reid has really carved out a sizable backup role. So you're typically expecting around 30 minutes from Gobert, but the price tag has come down a little. He has been much more productive with Mike Conley this year. That's something that we expected, and it's played out. 1.24 DraftKings points per minute, with a 19.3% usage rate for Gobert in the 8 games that he's played with Mike Conley. That's compared to 1.09 DraftKings points per minute with D'Angelo Russell. In the games he played with Russell, a 16% usage rate. So while 19.5% isn't high, when you keep in mind how efficient Rudy Gobert is, that's a pretty substantial increase in usage. You've seen it translate to more fantasy production as well. So getting fewer minutes is the negative, but certainly producing at a higher rate than he was makes him look pretty appealing. Kyle Anderson at 5,800 looks fine. Decent, mid-range price tag. He has been playing with the second unit as well. We know he can do everything when he's on the floor, so that's pretty appealing. So I like getting to both of those guys.
We'll talk about
McDaniels and Conley are both fine last piece ins as well.
Okay. Talk about Denver here.
Yeah.
San Antonio. Denver big favorites on the road. 12-point road favorites. 236 total. When you're coming into a game and you're 12-point road favorites, I mean, it means you're pretty good and it means your opponent's just trash. I mean, 124.5 implied total for the Nuggets today, highest on the slate. The two lowest on the slate are both Cleveland and Miami, for whatever it's worth. Third lowest, San Antonio Spurs at 111.5. But once again, looking at Denver, they're healthy right now. So we can dive into this. Jamal Murray, 7,600. We have Reggie Jackson pulling ownership at 3,500. Nikola Jokic, 11,700. Where do you prioritize Jokic today among the other high-priced options, none of whom are really getting that much ownership because value is few and far between?
Yeah, I mean, I think he looks the best. Like, he's the highest projected guy on the slate, and you're not getting a huge difference in salary anymore between him and Anthony Davis like you were. He's basically the same price as Embiid, but it's just difficult to get to this range, entirely, I think, unless we get other value opening up. And also, this is where that ownership really matters on guys like Denny Avdia, Nickeil Alexander-Walker that we're guessing are just over projected right now in terms of ownership. It's easier in tournaments to make good tournament lineups getting to guys like Jokic if you have like an 8% on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because then you can say, all right, I'm going to use Alexander-Walker as value and hope that I just run into a big game from him. If Alexander-Walker is 40%, that means that like everybody that's playing Jokic is playing Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And it makes it like really difficult to make contrarian lineups that build that way, and it's going to push you more towards going balanced and hoping that Alexander Walker sucks and Avdia sucks. So that's a really, really big difference. Like if that ownership ends up holding, it's going to make me even less likely to build these like stars and scrubs type lineups. Or not that's probably not even just lineups that get to Jokic. But if you get that ownership coming down where I can start saying like, okay, these guys at least have a path to having a good game and they're cheap and they're low owned, that makes the Jokic type plays more appealing, because you're getting a very high ceiling that's low owned, but low owned as a whole. But so that's why that ownership really matters on those guys as well. If that ownership holds, it becomes even more difficult to get to this pay up range. But if I can find a way to do it, certainly would like to. I mean, Jokic is the highest projected guy on the slate. He looks great on his own.
Interesting group of like mid 7K options at point guard today. DeJounte Murray, we talked about already. And then Jamal Murray for Denver. He's also pretty popular here. I don't think it's a huge surprise, though, that you're seeing a lot of this, a lot of ownership go to some of these mid-range plays, like these 7K options. Murray's another one of them. Plus, this is just a spectacular matchup. The real concern here, not that you can quantify it from a DFS standpoint, is the blowout risk, but it's a great spot, not just for Jokic, but for Murray and everybody else in Denver.
Yeah. So Reggie Jackson's pulling 20% ownership right now. This is another one where I think he's a decent value. I'd be very surprised if this ends up being right. But with Jamal Murray, 18, 19, 19, 25, 19, 23, 24 minutes. Granted, some of that was garbage time. Like last game, he played 23 and a half minutes, but 3.5 of that was garbage time. You're expecting around 20 minutes from Jackson,
too, where they won by 100. Yeah,
right. You're expecting, if this game's competitive, you're expecting around 20 minutes from Jackson. If it blows out, he can get more. He's a viable value play. I just am not really that interested if he's actually going to be owned by 1/5 of the field. I'll just go more balanced. But that's another one like Alexander Walker that I think paying close attention to that ownership is important. I like Jamal Murray at 7,600. I had talked last game that sometimes you see Murray with the second unit, sometimes you don't. 2 games ago, they went KCP with the second unit instead of Murray. Last game, they were back to Murray. If he gets those minutes, it's very valuable for him. You just don't know for sure what second unit rotation Malone is going to go with any given game. But at 7,600, even if he doesn't play with the second unit, Murray looks good. It's just he looks even better if he does get those minutes. So I like getting to Jamal Murray. Aaron Gordon looks pretty good at 6,400. Don't mind the relatively low on Michael Porter as well. This is another one. It kind of highlights like what I'm talking about with these builds. If you're going to actually get 20% ownership going to Reggie Jackson, that means you're just going to have a lot of lineups where people have Jokic with either Jackson, Alexander Walker, and it's pushing down the ownership on guys like Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, KCP at 4,500, where I can say like, okay, I can make a lower owned lineup where instead of having Jokic plus Jackson, I have Michael Porter Jr. plus, Donovan Mitchell. Like at lower ownership, like there's nothing wrong with the ceiling you're getting there and making that trade-off. I kind of just want whichever side of that 2v2 is lower owned. Right now, it's projected to be the side that isn't playing random backup point guards. So I'm happy to go to guys that are going to get real minutes. If that changes and you start getting more ownership coming into Porter, coming into Aaron Gordon, and in turn less ownership to these cheap guys, then sure, give me the Jokic, Reggie Jackson, or Jokic, Nickeil Alexander Walker, and hope that I run good.
Yeah, it seems like a precarious position to be in, though, where you're going, like you're jamming the high-priced guys, and then you're really hoping that these value options that already might get a decent amount of ownership because people are doing that, you're hoping that they can get to like 22 minutes and produce north of a fantasy point per minute as well. Like they need to do both, and that the top-tier guy needs to smash on top of that. I don't know. It's real weird. Look, things could open up. It's 6 games. It's 10:43 in the morning, so we could see some pretty significant changes like across the whole slate today. But right now, I think I'm with you. I mean, I get that you said you'd rather have either side, whichever side of that 2v2 is less popular. But I don't know. It feels sketchy going to getting the high price guys just so we can get to. Or going to those really, really cheap guys that might really only play 19, 20, 21 minutes.
Yeah, it's one thing if the cheap guys are low owned. It's totally different if your reward for those guys actually having a good game is just getting to have very similar lineups to 20% of the field. Like it's just not worth it in that case. So the ownership is huge on those guys. I saw King of All Trades in chat say he's a Nuggets fan and they don't blow a lot of teams out. Yeah, their second unit is absolute dog shit. So it's hard for them to actually blow teams out. The starters get out to a huge lead and then the second unit just gives it right back. I tweeted about it the other day. Like it feels like every slate that I end up not playing Jokic, I'll look and Jokic, is playing well early. And it's like, oh, Denver's out to a 22-point lead right out of the gate. Hopefully Jokic won't play the fourth. And then like 3 minutes into the second quarter, it's a 2-point game again.
Right. Yeah. Hard to figure that team out. San Antonio Spurs. Devin Vassell, 21% right now. And then it just falls off a cliff. I mean, look, this team's bad. And then to make matters worse, there's not even really considerable value because they're mostly healthy now. So, I mean, I think they're fully healthy now, aren't they? Because pretty much. You have Sohan's probable.
Yeah, you have Langford, McDermott, Sohan all probable. The only guy on the injury report that is out is Khem Birch, who nobody cares.
Right, doesn't make a difference. Yeah, like you said, even Langford's probable. So, What do we do now with the Spurs?
Yeah, so you did get Devin Vassell back in the starting lineup last game. He's still only 5,600. That is probably the closest thing to a true mispricing that we've had so far on this slate. Devin Vassell played 29 minutes in that game. It was a blowout loss at Houston, so he didn't get closing minutes, but he was certainly trending to play even more than those 29 minutes. But even if you get 28 to 30 from him, he's going to look good at 5,600. So, not an ideal matchup. There is blowout risk, obviously, but I do think he's just mispriced to be back in the starting lineup. So he's pulling 20% ownership. I have no issues with that whatsoever. Keldon Johnson at 6,800, Trey Jones at 5,300. Those guys are both fine as well. Certainly give you some upside. Trey Jones, we don't know exactly what the playing time is going to look like, but sat out the second half of a back-to-back last game, started and played 25 minutes the game before that. I expect you're getting like 26-ish minutes from him, which makes him look okay. We know the ceiling Keldon Johnson gives you, but his usage rate does come down a bit now that Devin Vassell's back. So I think Vassell's the priority here. And then if you get to some Keldon Johnson, some Trey Jones, that's fine. Other than that, I don't think that there's really much that looks good. Zach Collins is up to 6,600. Charles Bassey's up to 5,300. I would normally think this is kind of an interesting spot to make the Bassey play, hope the game blows out and he gets extra run. But at 5,300, I don't think you can do it.
Right.
Sohan takes a hit with the team getting healthy as well. He's another one at 5,500 where 3% owned. I don't hate that in tournaments, especially if it does end up being that the ownership on these really cheap guys stays really high and you can just play a 3% Sohan and as like a 2v2, that's fine. But he does take a step back as well with all of these guys healthy.
Let's wrap this one up with kind of an interesting game to talk about. Toronto and the LA Lakers. And we'll send you guys on your way. Before that, though, I saw people, by the way, in chat going, when Josh was talking about that recent little run he's been on with PrizePicks, saying, yeah, wish I could play PrizePicks here. I can't. Well, two things. One, if you want the free month, BetMGM is probably available in your state, and all you have to do is deposit $10, put it on any game, and after that settles, you're getting a free month of Stokastic plus Platinum. I mean, it's legitimately the easiest no-brainer ever. Plus, there's your first bet up to $1,000 it's first bet insurance. So if it loses $10, 20, 1,000, if it loses, it all comes back to you in bonus bets anyway. So that's amazing. If BetMGM's available to you. And as we're supposed to say, if you or someone has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You know how that works. But if you're already there, if you're on PrizePicks and you're like, listen, I would like to get the tools. 50% off everything on the site. Link in the description, link in chat. You click the link, you go over to the landing page. You can select whatever you want. You want to do a full month of NBA, or you want to do a full month of every sport, or just a week of NBA or a week of every sport. 50% off, half off the top, chopped right off the top. That's it. Simple as that. There's nothing else to it. It's 50% off. That includes the lineup generator too, right? All these tools that are built and maintained by some of the best DFS players out there. You might not see their faces here. You see them at the top of the leaderboard very often for obvious reasons. And all of these tools built and used by them every day. Boom Bust tool, that's a huge one. The Top Stacks tool for all these other sports, ownership, player projections, you name it. You get 50% off and you can pick whatever you want. Or if you go, hey, the lineup generator, been hearing a lot about this. Well, 50% off that. That's $4.48 a week. The link is down there. I'm not trying to overwhelm you guys with options. All I'm saying is if you're sitting here going, I can't do this, I can't do this one, guarantee there's something to take advantage of to get your foot in the door and get a massive discount in the process. Lineup generators, $4.48 for the first week. Even if you're playing $2 a day, you're still looking at a situation where you win on that and you keep using it, and you're no worse for wear. So check it out. Link to everything in the description. 50% off everything. Or if you just want to hit the BetMGM one, I mean, that's the no-brainer if it's available to you. Free month, $120 value. First bet insurance up to $1,000. Simple. Very simple. Link in the description. Boom. All right. Let's go to Frankie Edwards. I'd like to try it out. Try it out, dude. I'm telling you, a million different ways to get in there. And Frankie just said, I won 200 on BetMGM last night. Awesome. Hopefully you took advantage of the promotion and you got the free month as well. All right. So Anthony Davis, man, this game coming into against at home against Toronto. So we'll start with Toronto. My fault. Let's back it up here. Start with the Toronto Raptors. Fred VanVleet, is all he got a $30,000 fine for those antics?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be more.
Good for him, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that sucks. Don't get me wrong, but you and I thought a suspension might be looming.
Yeah, I mean, he made it. He said straight from the beginning he didn't care.
I know.
I hope it encourages them to do it more often if it's only going to be $30K.
I love it.
That was great.
It's anyone that says that's bad for the game doesn't really understand the aspect of entertainment here. He didn't really do anything wrong.
Well, and also, like you were saying and he said it, if you are getting that, like the only guy giving you text is this ref and his crew, like there's also merit to just being like, yo, like this is affecting shit. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And guess what? I bet after he said that, they said that the league went and reviewed some stuff. They won't tell you that, but I bet they did.
Right, most likely. I mean, yeah, it's to me, it's not like he said anything like personal about the guy other than that he sucks at his job, which I think is all fair.
Yeah.
You know,
he didn't dick too, which is funny.
Yeah, but like it's not like he went after like his family or anything. Like he didn't say anything he didn't say anything unprofessional in the sense that like it didn't have to do with their professional relationship.
Right. And also, this is competitive spirit. Like I'm never gonna look at that and go, oh man, what a scumbag. He wants to win and he's pissed off that whether you believe that he's right or wrong is unimportant here. It's how he felt. But it's because he wanted to win. Right.
And it's a season-long thing. It's not like the guy had a bad game and he decided to just go out there and say, like, this dude is awful, blah, blah, blah. Like, and also, I always hate the, like, fake outrage backlash this kind of stuff gets because I wish athletes could just say what they're thinking a lot more instead of just, like, the canned cliche answers whenever they're asked a question. But then they do, and people are like, oh, that's so unprofessional. It's like, no, I would prefer they just, like, be humans and say what they're thinking.
I'm 100% in agreement. Just be authentic because that's the type of stuff that gets, you know what else it does? It makes you kind of fall in love with these players. Like if you're the NBA, you should like that type of stuff. Fine. If you give them a fine, but you know that Toronto fans are out there being like, yeah, Fred VanVleet's my man, my guy now.
Right. Yeah. Like
they love that.
Like showing your personality just allows you to become a bigger fan favorite. It makes it easier to root for you when like, and I mean, I feel the same way about like Draymond and Brooks. Obviously, a lot of people dislike both of them, but it also just makes it easier. Like if you're a Golden State fan, it's easier to root for Draymond. If you're a Memphis fan, especially when they're playing Golden State, like it's easier to root for Brooks. It just adds entertainment. It adds personality.
In Philly, it's similar with Embiid. Like he speaks his mind, and people outside of Philly don't like Embiid all that. Not a lot of them don't love Embiid, but if you're a Philly fan, you love the guy. So yeah, it's just the way it is. It's good it's objectively good for the game.
Yeah, agreed. And also like, because I guess the argument for being bad for the game would be that like it's, you know, lending, like giving credence to the fact that like the refs suck, but like also if you're going to put pressure on the league to actually get refs that don't suck, that ultimately is good for the game too.
Yes. Now, do you want that every game like a team loses to be doing that?
Right.
No, then it gets monotonous and you're like, all right, these guys are full of shit now. They're just, complaining every time they lose.
And VanVleet specifically said too, like that's not why we lost. He's like, we got outplayed, but also this guy sucks.
Exactly. And you have to appreciate that. That's all. Mr. Future Phenom said only 30K in quotes, referring to what I said. Listen, you go back and watch that. With just like flagrant use of you know, I think he was saying, look, all types of profanity. Doesn't bother me one bit. I thought it was a great presser. And then like calling these guys out by name. You and I both thought that it was going to be more than a $30,000 fine.
I thought it would be more than 30. I wasn't going to be surprised if they gave him a game just to set the precedent. Like, don't do this shit.
Right.
Because at 30K, like with the money these guys make, if you set the precedent that it's 30K for saying whatever you want directly about a ref, I think you're going to see it happen more than 0 times going forward. If he gets suspended, you're just going to get guys going back to being like, I don't have anything to say.
Where does the money go? Where does that money go? Just like back into the league?
I think charities, but I'm not sure.
Really?
I thought I'd heard that, but I have no idea.
All right. So where do NBA player fines go? The NBA says that it allocates fine money to charity, although it is the only professional sports organization that does not publicize what specific charities the NBA or the received the donations. Okay, so it goes to
Adam Silver Child Fund.
I was just gonna say, yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that's what they say. The NFL has contributed a large sum to retired players with health problems. That's cool. And to charities. All right. It's the only league that doesn't publicize what specific. Wouldn't you love to know where it actually goes to?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that would be interesting. Well, it's just so weird not to publish it because like it's a good thing. So like, why outside of like nefarious reasons, why would you not publish it?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's so many charities out there where if you actually look at it, it's like 4% of total donations actually go to the charity, you know?
Yeah.
And they operate under the auspices of like non-profit organizations. And everyone at the top is rich. Wild stuff. I need to start up you want to start up a non-profit?
Yeah.
Toronto. What do you want to do with Van Vliet and Pirtle and Siakam today?
They all look pretty good here. Solid matchup against the Lakers and just not a ton of great plays on this slate make them look better. The type of upside you're getting from Van Vliet at 8,300. No real issue with that price tag. Playing huge minutes as usual. Siakam's 8,700. You and I talked about it the other day when he was down to 8,500. It's certainly a favorable price tag on Siakam, but it is also deserved. He's averaged about 1.1 fantasy points per minute since the start of the new year, compared to 1.35 in the first half of the season. Up until the new year, which basically at this point is like the halfway mark of the season. So he has deserved this drop off in price, but there's still a ceiling for him. He's still a good player. He's still playing big minutes, has power forward eligibility, so that's nice. Jakob Poeltl's been solid since joining Toronto, played another 30 minutes last game. Didn't have as good a game as he had been recently, but, the opportunities are still there. So all three of those guys look good, but I don't mind taking shots at Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby in tournaments as well. Anunoby hasn't played well recently, but played 37 minutes last game, did score 18 points. He's just not getting ownership. Scotty Barnes played 37 minutes. Like the playing time is going to be there for these guys as well. And they're just getting less ownership than the other three. They're not as good as the other three, but it is a way that you can sort of get exposure to this team and just save some ownership. Gary Trent's pretty cheap, but he's kind of in this mid-20s roll off the bench, which makes it difficult to really want to get much of him. But at 4,900, I guess it's like if Denny Avdija really pulls 24% ownership at 4,400, then sure, give me some Gary Trent at 1/8 the ownership. But chances are that those ownership numbers come down, and I'm not really getting too much Trent.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's what it was. Ritz, I was trying to think. I knew there was an NFL player recently that they had figured out his charity was not particularly charitable. It was Russell Wilson.
Oh, okay. A lot of them aren't. Here's Tank said another good question is how much money and fines have been collected since the fining started. I don't know, but I just saw something on Bloomberg from 2022 that said the 2020 season, $6.9 million in fines were collected. In 2021, the very next, $36 million.
Well, because they get fined for like technical fouls too, don't they?
Do you get fined for every tech?
I think so.
What's that, Jacob? 15,000? Yeah. Oh, okay. That's crazy. 15,000 every time you get a tech. But so do you get fined for flagrants then? Like a flagrant 2 and an ejection? My guess is no, right?
I have no idea.
Right. So I guess so you're not allowed to say something mean to the ref, but you can tomahawk chop a guy across his jugular. And what the fuck, dude? That's the weirdest thing. So we got to look that up and see if there's fines for like flagrant 2 and ejections. All right. Let's close this out with the Lakers. Anthony Davis, only 9% today. You had mentioned earlier in the show that, yeah, of course, his price has come up. It's closer to Jokic now, but in the 13 games he's played without LeBron this year, he's averaging 1.72 DraftKings points per minute with a 35% usage rate, 15% rebound rate. Dude's an excellent shot blocker. I know that Russell's back. I wouldn't say maybe in this form of Russell of Westbrook, you could consider D'Angelo Russell a proxy, but with LeBron off the floor, almost 1 3/4 fantasy points per minute in 13 games for Davis this year.
Yeah, he's been great. My first thought when I saw the 9% ownership was like, oh, that's really appealing. But when you do kind of take a step back and think about it and just how the slate shakes out, that's similar to the ownership you're getting on Embiid. It's not that much less than you're getting for Jokic. So I think it just makes Davis look good, but also just, comparable to Embiid, comparable to Jokic, where you're getting him at a little bit cheaper price tag. You're getting a massive ceiling. If you can find the contrarian way to get to Anthony Davis, or just, find a way to get to Davis and build a solid lineup around it, I like the upside that gives you. Like you said, 1.7 DraftKings points per minute. I think to some extent, D'Angelo Russell or Westbrook can be a proxy for Russell, but I also expect that Russell cuts into Davis's production less just because he's a better fit. D'Angelo Russell can shoot and just make the offense better, whereas Russell Westbrook obviously cannot. So I don't think that, I think he's a proxy in that it does put another high usage guy on the floor. He's higher usage than anybody that was replacing him, but I do expect the offense as a whole just to function better with D'Angelo Russell out there than it did when it was Westbrook and Davis.
Okay. The first 5 technicals are 2,000. Then it jumps to 3,000 for 6 through 10. After 10, it's 4,000. Then their 16th is 5,000 and a suspension. Fascinating stuff. Adam, how much do you think the league has made on text this year?
Just on text?
Yeah.
I have no idea. 5 million?
Well, here's an article that says, how much has the NBA made in technical fouls this year? And then it just doesn't answer the question. So, yeah, never mind. Whatever. What else do you want to do for the Lakers?
5 million is probably high. 5 million divided by 2,000 is 2,500 texts. I can't imagine there's been that many texts this year.
How many texts did you say that would be?
Well, it would be 2,500 if they were all 2K, but then you have, Draymond and Dylan Brooks getting more, but, and Luka, but yeah, I mean, that 5 million is too high, but a lot.
Yeah, that would be a whole lot. So I don't know. I'm interested now to see. That would be 2,500 texts.
It at 2K a piece, yeah.
Yeah. 2K. Oh, right. So it does go up, but still that would be a lot.
That would be a lot. Yeah.
Do you think I would love to go back and see if the low paid players that come in and get a shot never get very rarely get technicals, because that $2,000 actually means something to some of them.
So I think it should change the narrative on guys like Mike Conley. That was always the thing. Oh, Mike Conley's such a nice guy. He never gets a tech. Maybe he's just really frugal and he's still a dick. He just doesn't want to pay 2K to criticize a ref.
Maybe you're right.
Maybe he actually doesn't care at all about winning. It's not worth 2K to him to say what he thinks.
Under his breath, he's saying the most hateful, insidious stuff ever. And if you could hear his inner thoughts, you go, "Oh my God!"
He thinks like Kevin Garnett. He's just not willing to pay for it.
Right. That would maybe guys just don't. You like you said, you have to respect that, even if you have a lot of money. If you're like, I just don't feel like giving my money to somebody that doesn't deserve it.
Right. Yeah.
And by that, I don't mean charities, because who knows if it's even going to charities. Anything else on the Lakers?
Not really. I mean, Russell coming back cuts into everything else. You have Jared Vanderbilt at 5,600, who I think everybody's pretty well aware at this point what you're getting from him. It's not much offense, but he does give you a ceiling just because of his ability to rebound, get offensive rebounds and putbacks, if everything goes your way. D'Angelo Russell at 6,900, I think gives you a ceiling at 2% owned, but don't know if he's going to be limited. If we get him not limited here, I do think that's kind of interesting at low ownership, especially if you are going with a more balanced lineup. He's somebody that at least can give you that really big game, but nothing I would prioritize here. Certainly love getting to Anthony Davis where you can, but it's not exactly easy.
Okay. Well, appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Digging into this technical foul stuff here. We got almost 600 people watching with us. If you could be so kind and generous with your single second is what it takes, hit that thumbs up before you leave. Subscribe to the channel. For those of you watching after the fact, appreciate you too. Leave a comment. Follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS. Me at Lafayette_D. Shout out to Jacob for producing this one. See you back here tonight on the deeper dive to wrap up the work week. Peace.